When I won $10 million, my daughter Lena threw me a celebration dinner, then threw me out of the house that same night. "You can't keep up with our new standards," she said, changing the door code while I stood in the rain with my suitcase. When Lena tried to claim my prize, she finally discovered whose name was actually on that ticket. But that revelation was just the beginning of what would unfold. Ever had family turn on you when money got involved? Stick around. This gets wild. The first number matched, 23. Sarah's birthday. I felt my hands slow on the plate I was drying, the terry cloth towel suddenly rough against my fingertips. The announcer continued with that professional rhythm radio host's perfect over years of practice, but his voice seemed to echo differently in Lena's spacious kitchen. 14 the day we'd closed on our old house, back when interest rates were criminal and Lena was still in elementary school. My eyes moved to the ticket, that familiar blue rectangle with its silver scratch-off coating worn thin from handling. The third number rolled out, 11 March 11th, the day Lena took her first wobbly steps across the linoleum floor of our old place, arms stretched toward Sarah's waiting embrace. The late afternoon sun caught the magnetic pickup truck, casting a tiny shadow across the ticket's edge as it clung to Lena's stainless steel refrigerator. I set the plate down carefully on the marble counter, my movements deliberate and measured. This kitchen still felt too big sometimes, too pristine compared to the cozy chaos of the house where Sarah and I had raised Lena. But seeing my daughter and her family comfortable in this beautiful home made every penny of the sale worthwhile. The fourth number matched. Then the fifth. My throat felt dry, but I couldn't move away from the radio. The announcer paused. They always pause before the final number, building that split second of tension that can change lives. 31. I stared at the ticket, my eyes tracing the familiar handwritten numbers in blue ink. All 6 matched perfectly, lined up like dominoes waiting to fall. The modern kitchen felt smaller suddenly, despite its cathedral ceiling and island that could seat 8. I reached for the ticket with fingers that trembled just slightly, the magnetic pickup truck clicking against the refrigerator surface as I lifted the blue paper free. I took a photo with my phone, a habit I'd developed over the years for important documents. The camera made that artificial shutter sound, sharp and final in the quiet kitchen. $10 million. The numbers swam before my eyes, and I had to blink several times to bring them back into focus. This was real. This was actually happening. I thought about Sarah, wished she could be here to see this moment, to laugh at my stunned expression and remind me to breathe. The ticket felt warm from my grip, and I noticed my reflection in the chrome surface of Lena's professional-grade oven, a 68-year-old man holding a slip of paper worth more money than he'd ever imagined having. The radio had moved on to weather reports, but I could still hear the echo of those 6 numbers bouncing around inside my skull like pinballs. This house, this beautiful house I'd helped provide for my daughter's family, suddenly felt like the perfect place to receive such incredible news. My first instinct was to call Lena. She'd always been the practical one, the daughter who inherited Sarah's level head and my stubborn streak in equal measure. I found her number in my contacts, still listed as Lena Bug, from the nickname she'd hated as a teenager, and pressed call before I could second-guess myself. The phone rang twice before her familiar voice answered, slightly breathless like she'd been chasing the grandkids around the backyard. "Hi, Dad, what's up?" she said. I opened my mouth to speak, then closed it again. How do you tell someone you've just won $10 million? How do you make those words sound real when they still felt like fiction in your own mouth? "Lena, I started, then stopped, gripping the ticket tighter. "I think I won." The silence on the other end stretched for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. I could hear her breathing, could picture her processing what I'd just said in whatever room of this house she was in. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. There was something careful about it, measured in a way that reminded me of Sarah when she was choosing her words deliberately. "Congratulations, Dad," she said, and I caught the slight pause before the exclamation, like she was testing how the word felt in her mouth. Then she laughed, but it sounded different from her usual easy laughter, more controlled. "That's incredible news. But Dad, keep it quiet for now, okay? Let me talk to Colt about the proper procedure. We want to make sure you handle this the right way." After we hung up, I walked out to the back porch. Lena's back porch. The late afternoon was painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, and the view from here was certainly better than what we'd had at the old place. The ticket was still in my hand, and I looked down at it again. Those 6 numbers that had just changed everything. Lena's words echoed in my head. Keep it quiet and proper procedure. She was right, of course. These things needed to be handled carefully, legally, with all the paperwork in order. My phone buzzed with a text message from her. "Dad, don't post anything on social media or tell anyone else yet. Put the ticket somewhere safe, a drawer, or lock it up. We'll figure out the next steps together." I read the message twice, then looked back at the lottery ticket in my palm. Part of me wanted to frame it, to put it somewhere I could see it and remember this moment. Instead, I walked back inside and placed it carefully under the pickup truck magnet, right where it had been when those 6 numbers changed my life. Standing there in Lena's kitchen, with the golden light fading to purple outside the expansive windows, I felt a strange mix of excitement and uncertainty. I thought about tomorrow, about the conversations that lay ahead, about how this windfall might help secure an even better future for the grandkids in this house that I'd helped make possible. The morning light filtered through Lena's kitchen window differently than it had the day before. Everything seemed brighter, more promising, like the world itself was celebrating alongside me. I woke at 5:30, earlier than usual, with an energy I hadn't felt in months. The lottery ticket was still there under the pickup truck magnet, those 6 life-changing numbers facing the refrigerator door like a secret only the appliances knew. I started coffee in Lena's expensive machine, the gurgling sound unusually cheerful as I planned my day. Then I saw it. A handwritten note stuck to the refrigerator door just below the lottery ticket. Lena's careful cursive spelling out a list. "Dad, cook breakfast for everyone, iron Colt's work shirts, sort recycling, scrub kitchen thoroughly, pick up kids from school at 3:15. My name at the bottom, underlined twice." I smiled as I read through the tasks, telling myself this was a small celebration, a way to contribute to the household while we figured out our next steps. $10 million was sitting right there above the note, and here I was being asked to help with daily chores. It felt wonderfully normal, grounding even. I pulled out eggs and bacon, humming under my breath as I heated Lena's professional-grade skillet. The bacon sizzled and popped, filling the kitchen with the kind of smell that makes a house feel like a home. Colt appeared first, his work uniform wrinkled from the laundry basket, looking at me expectantly. "Morning," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Lena said you'd have my shirts ready." I nodded toward the ironing board I'd already set up in the corner, steam rising from the iron like morning mist. "Almost done with the first one," I told him, flipping the bacon with one hand while adjusting the iron's temperature with the other. The kids thundered down the stairs next, backpacks bouncing, lunchboxes clutched in small fists. 8-year-old Emma hugged my leg while I was stirring scrambled eggs, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly right. "Grandpa, Mom says our family won money," she whispered, her voice full of the kind of wonder only children can manage. I ruffled her hair, the soft strands catching the morning light. "That's right, sweetheart. We're very lucky." 6-year-old Jake climbed onto his chair, surveying the breakfast spread with the serious expression he'd inherited from his mother. "Are we rich now, Grandpa?" he asked, and I found myself pausing with the spatula halfway to his plate. Before I could answer, Lena appeared in the doorway, already dressed for work, her hair pulled back in the efficient ponytail she'd worn since high school. "We're comfortable," she said, her voice carrying a note of caution I hadn't heard before. "But we don't talk about family business outside this house." After they left, Colt to his construction job, Lena to her office, the kids to school, I worked through the list with a strange contentment. The recycling bins clinked as I sorted glass from plastic, the familiar rhythm soothing in a way I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed with another text from Lena. "Dad, also vacuum under the living room sofa and wash the ceramic water jug by hand. Dishwasher might crack it." I read the message twice, noting how she'd added, "also," like an afterthought, though the care she showed for her grandmother's ceramic jug touched me. That jug had been Sarah's mother's, passed down through 3 generations of careful hands. I found myself smiling as I filled it with sudsy water, remembering how Sarah used to polish it every Sunday after church. The ceramic felt smooth and cool under my fingers, and washing it seemed like honoring a tradition that connected all of us across time. By afternoon, I'd finished everything on the list and decided to make a small gesture of celebration. I drove to the bakery where Sarah and I used to buy birthday cakes, the same one that had made Lena's wedding cake 15 years ago. The apple pie in the display case looked perfect, golden crust, sugar crystals catching the overhead lights like tiny diamonds. "Special occasion?" the baker asked, and I almost told her about the lottery before catching myself. "Just family dinner," I said instead, the words feeling both true and incomplete. The pie box was warm in my hands as I drove back to Lena's house, imagining the looks on everyone's faces when I brought out dessert. The kitchen smelled like the roast I'd put in the slow cooker that morning, and everything felt ready for what I hoped would be a celebration, even a quiet one. But when Lena came home and saw the bakery box on her granite counter, her expression shifted in a way that made my chest tighten. "Dad," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "We talked about keeping things quiet. An expensive pie from Morrison's bakery. People might wonder." She opened the box, looking down at the perfect lattice crust, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not anger, exactly, but a kind of controlled frustration. "We shouldn't draw attention yet. Not until everything's properly handled." I nodded, understanding flooding through me like cold water. Of course she was right. A man on my pension didn't usually buy $15 pies on random weekdays. "I'm sorry," I said. "I wasn't thinking." She reached over and squeezed my shoulder, her touch warm and reassuring. "It's okay, Dad. We're all adjusting, but we need to be smart about this." The pie sat between us, beautiful and somehow accusatory, while I mentally calculated how many people might have seen me at the bakery, might have wondered why Ed Morrison was suddenly splurging. Dinner felt different that evening, charged with an undercurrent I couldn't quite name. Lena had lit a candle. Just one, nothing fancy. But it flickered between us as we passed the roast and vegetables. Colt carved the meat with precise, economical movements, his calloused hands steady on the knife. The kids chattered about their day at school, and I found myself watching Lena's face in the candlelight, waiting for the moment when we'd acknowledge what had changed in our lives. When she finally spoke, her words were carefully chosen, each syllable deliberate. "Our family just won the lottery," she said, looking at each of us in turn. "This means we can do some things we've always wanted." I'll transfer Emma and Jake to St. Catherine's Academy next fall. Better teachers, smaller classes. Colt, we can finally get you that new truck you've been needing." She gestured with her fork, outlining plans like an architect sketching blueprints. My spoon clinked against the bowl's rim, the sound sharper than I'd intended. She continued talking. Furniture upgrades, vacation possibilities, college funds for the children, but never once mentioned me. I was there at the table, had bought the ticket, had matched those 6 numbers, but somehow I'd become invisible in the narrative of our family's good fortune. Colt nodded at each suggestion like he was signing contracts, his expression businesslike and focused. Emma clapped when she heard about the new school, and Jake asked if the new truck would be red. The conversation flowed around me like I was a stone in a stream, present but not participating. When Lena paused to take a sip of water, I cleared my throat. "It's wonderful that we can help the kids," I said, trying to inject myself back into the we she'd been using. Sarah would have loved knowing they'd have such opportunities. Lena smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes the way it usually did. "Dad," she said, setting down her water glass with the same precision Colt had used with the carving knife, "don't worry about any of the paperwork or procedures. This kind of thing can be complicated. Taxes, legal requirements, all sorts of red tape. Why don't you give me the ticket for safekeeping? Colt's meeting with someone at the bank tomorrow who handles these situations." I swallowed the bite of roast, buying myself a moment to think. "I left it on the fridge so I won't forget where it is," I said finally. "Right there under the pickup truck magnet, safe and sound." Lena's eyes paused for half a beat, a flicker of something I couldn't quite read. "Of course," she said. "But eventually we'll need to take it to claim the prize. It might be easier if I handle that step." The candle flame wavered between us, casting shifting shadows across her face. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of normal conversation. Homework assignments, weekend plans, Colt's work schedule. But I found myself studying my daughter's expressions, listening to the spaces between her words. When we cut into the apple pie I'd bought, it tasted different than I'd expected, sweeter and somehow less satisfying. Emma and Jake devoured their slices, praising my choice, but Lena only picked at hers. "Tomorrow I'll make a proper grocery list," she said as we cleared the table. "We should plan meals more carefully, make sure we're not being wasteful." I nodded and began loading the dishwasher, the familiar task oddly comforting after the strange undercurrents of dinner. As I rinsed the plates, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window. An old man doing dishes while $10 million sat pinned to the refrigerator behind him. Something about that image felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, but I couldn't put my finger on what was bothering me. Later that night, lying in the guest bedroom that had become my permanent residence since selling my house, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the dinner conversation. "Our family just won the lottery." The words echoed in the darkness, and I realized that somehow, in all her careful planning and generous distribution of our windfall, Lena hadn't mentioned a single thing for me. Not a vacation, not a comfortable chair, not even a simple acknowledgement that the ticket had been purchased with my Social Security money. The guest room felt smaller in the darkness, and I found myself wondering when exactly I'd stopped being the father who'd won the lottery and become simply the man who happened to be holding the ticket. The morning brought a new version of yesterday's list, but this one had a red column drawn down the right side with check written at the top in Lena's precise handwriting. Each task now had an empty box beside it, waiting for confirmation that I'd completed it to standard. The check boxes looked like the kind of thing you'd use for a housekeeper, not family. I pulled the list free and read through it. Vacuum living room following carpet grain direction, stack bowls by size in cabinet, fold bath towels in triangular thirds, dust baseboards with microfiber cloth only. The level of detail felt different from yesterday's simple tasks, each instruction specific enough that failure would be obvious. I started with the living room, running Lena's expensive vacuum in careful parallel lines across the carpet. The machine hummed efficiently, picking up dust and debris I couldn't even see, and I found myself taking pride in the neat pattern I was creating. When I moved to the kitchen, I arranged the bowls by diameter in the cabinet, smallest nested inside largest, creating a tidy tower that maximized space. The towels took longer. Folding them into triangular thirds required more thought than I'd expected, but eventually I managed to create neat, uniform stacks that looked like something from a hotel display. Each completed task felt like a small victory, proof that I could meet whatever standards had been set. I was wiping down the last baseboard when Colt appeared, still in his work clothes, boots heavy on the hardwood floor. He walked through the living room slowly, his eyes scanning the carpet pattern I'd created. Then he stopped, bent down, and flipped one of the bathroom towels I'd folded. "Wrong angle," he said, his voice matter-of-fact. "The fold should point toward the door, not away from it." I looked at the towel, trying to see what he saw, but it looked identical to the others to my eyes. "I can fix that," I said, reaching for the stack. "No," he said, his hand stopping mine. "Just remember for next time." He walked away without another word, leaving me standing there with the towel half unfolded in my hands. 20 minutes later, Lena came through the kitchen, running her finger along the granite counter where I'd just finished cleaning. She held up her fingertip, examining it in the light. "There's still a streak here," she said, tapping the spot with her nail. "The microfiber cloth works better if you use circular motions." I looked at the counter, which looked spotless to me, but nodded anyway. "I'll remember that," I said, already reaching for the cleaning cloth again. The afternoon brought a text from Lena. "Dad, Colt's meeting with the bank specialist tomorrow morning. Can you send a photo of the lottery ticket? They need to verify the numbers for their records." I read the message twice, something about it feeling both reasonable and wrong at the same time. Of course, they would need to verify the numbers. That made sense. I took a photo of the front, making sure the numbers were clearly visible, then sent it to Lena with a message. "Here you go. Good luck tomorrow." Her response came back quickly. "Thanks, Dad. This will help speed things up." By evening, I'd decided to cook something special. Sarah's beef stew, the recipe she'd perfected over 20 years of Sunday dinners. The ingredients were simple, but the technique was precise. Browning the meat until it developed a proper crust, building layers of flavor with onions and garlic, adding the bay leaves at exactly the right moment. The smell that filled Lena's kitchen was pure comfort, rich and savory and full of memories. I stirred the pot slowly, tasting and adjusting, adding a pinch more salt when the flavors seemed flat. This was the kind of meal that had brought our family together for decades, the smell alone enough to call everyone to the table without words. As the stew simmered, I set the table carefully, using Lena's good dishes and cloth napkins, trying to create the kind of dinner that honored both the recipe and the occasion of our changing fortunes. But when the family gathered around the table and I ladled the stew into bowls, Colt's first spoonful ended in a grimace. "Too salty," he said, pushing the bowl away slightly. "I can barely taste anything else." Lena took a careful bite, her expression thoughtful and diplomatic. "Dad, we've been trying to eat healthier lately. Less sodium, more fresh vegetables. This is, well, it's a bit heavy for what we're used to now." I felt heat rise in my cheeks, the kind of embarrassment that comes from having something you're proud of rejected. "I can adjust the recipe," I said, already reaching for my bowl to taste what they were tasting. "It's the same way Sarah always made it." Colt set down his spoon with a decisive clink against the ceramic. This kitchen has higher standards now. We can't just eat the same old things anymore. Maybe you can't keep up with where we're headed. This kitchen was bought with my money, I said, the words coming out before I could stop them. The silence that followed felt dangerous, like the moment before thunder when the air gets too thick to breathe. Lena's face went very still, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger exactly, but a cold calculation that made my chest tighten. "Enough," she said, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Dad, I think you need to take a step back. You're getting confused about boundaries." She stood up from the table, her movements controlled and deliberate. "Colt, can you help Dad pack his things? I think it would be better if he stayed somewhere else for a while, until we can sort all this out properly." The words didn't make sense at first, bouncing off my understanding like stones off water. Pack my things? Stay somewhere else? This was my daughter, my family, my home, at least the home I'd made possible. The next hour passed in a blur of shocked disbelief. Colt moved through the guest room like an efficient machine, folding my clothes into the old suitcase I'd brought when I moved in after selling my house. Lena supervised from the doorway, her arms crossed, watching as my few possessions disappeared into the bag. My medications went into a small paper sack. The photos of Sarah, my reading glasses, the book I'd been halfway through. Everything that made the room mine was methodically erased. Rain had started falling by the time they were finished, fat drops spattering against the windows like accusations. The floodlight on the front porch snapped on as Colt carried my suitcase outside, the harsh, white glare making the rain look like silver needles. "Dad," Lena said, standing in the doorway with the house's warmth spilling out around her. "This isn't permanent. We just need some time to figure things out." But even as she spoke, she was changing the electronic door code, her fingers quick and certain on the keypad. "We'll talk soon, okay? Once everyone's had time to cool down." The door closed with a soft click, the sound of the electronic lock engaging like a period at the end of a sentence. I stood on the porch for a moment, rain soaking through my jacket, looking at the windows of the house I'd helped buy, watching the warm light spill out onto the lawn I'd mowed just 3 days ago. Then I picked up my suitcase and walked to my car, the gravel crunching under my feet like broken promises. Sitting in the driver's seat with rain drumming on the roof, I opened the glove compartment and pulled out the folder I kept my important papers in. The deed transfer was there, along with the sale agreement from my old house, every signature clear and legally binding. "I shouldn't have sold," I whispered to the empty car, the words fogging the windshield. A signature can mean loss. I spent the night in my car in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner, rain drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Sleep came in fragments between the glare of passing headlights and the weight of what had just happened. When morning light finally crept across the dashboard, I drove to the only place I could think of, Charlie Hensley's workshop, where my old friend had been fixing small engines and dispensing practical wisdom for 30 years. The bell above his door chimed as I walked in, the familiar smell of motor oil and metal shavings wrapping around me like a comfortable coat. Charlie looked up from a lawnmower he was rebuilding, his weathered hands pausing on a wrench when he saw my face. "Ed," he said, wiping his palms on his coveralls, "you look like hell run over twice. What happened?" The concern in his voice made my throat tighten in a way I hadn't expected. I told him everything, the lottery win, the strange behavior, being thrown out of the house I'd helped buy. Charlie listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as the story unfolded. When I finished, he set down his tools and looked at me with the kind of steady gaze that cuts through nonsense. "Ed, tell me you signed the back of that ticket." The question hit me like cold water, sudden and clarifying. "Always do," I said, the answer automatic from decades of habit. "Sarah taught me that first week we were married. Sign the back of any lottery ticket soon as you buy it," she said. "Makes it legally yours. Can't be claimed by anyone else." Charlie nodded, a grim smile spreading across his grease-stained features. "Smart woman, you're Sarah. Real smart woman." He gestured toward the folding chair beside his workbench. "Sit down and show me that photo you took of the ticket." I pulled out my phone, fingers fumbling with the screen until I found the picture I'd snapped in Lena's kitchen. The numbers were clear in the photo, each digit sharp and unmistakable, but Charlie squinted at the image and shook his head. "This is just the front. What about the back?" I stared at him, the question not making sense at first. "I only took a photo of the front when Lena asked for it. The back..." I trailed off, realizing I'd never actually looked at the back of the ticket since pinning it to the refrigerator. Charlie's expression grew more serious. "Ed, you need to see what's written on that backside. If your signature's there, and I'm betting it is knowing you, then that ticket belongs to you legally, no matter where it's sitting right now." He pulled out his own phone, scrolling through his contacts. "My nephew Jerry works for the State Lottery Commission. Let me call him and find out exactly what the rules are for claiming a prize." The conversation with Jerry was brief, but illuminating. Charlie put the call on speaker, and I listened as his nephew explained the procedure in the patient tone of someone who'd answered these questions many times before. To claim a lottery prize over a certain amount, you need the original ticket and valid identification. The ticket has to be signed by the claimant. That signature on the back is what legally establishes ownership. Without both the original ticket and the proper signature, there's no claim. Period. Jerry paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Why are you asking, Uncle Charlie? You finally hit it big?" Charlie glanced at me before answering. "Just curiosity, Jerry. Thanks for the information." After he hung up, we sat in silence for a moment, the implications settling between us like dust. "Ed," Charlie said finally, "you need to get that ticket back. If it's signed in your name and they try to claim it, that's fraud. Plain and simple." My hands shook slightly as I dialed Lena's number. The phone rang 4 times before she answered, her voice crisp and businesslike. "Hi, Dad. How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine, Lena. I need to talk to you about the lottery ticket." The pause that followed stretched longer than comfortable, and I could hear voices in the background. Colt's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. "What about it, Dad?" she asked finally. "I need you to look at the back of it, the signature on the back." Another pause, shorter this time but somehow more loaded. "Dad, I don't understand what you're getting at." Her voice had changed, become more cautious, like she was feeling her way through unfamiliar territory. "The name on the back, Lena. Whose name is written on the back of that ticket?" The silence that followed felt enormous, filling Charlie's workshop like floodwater. When she spoke again, her voice was different, flatter, more controlled. "The name on the back is Dad's." The admission hung between us like a confession. "Your name, Dad. You signed it." Charlie was nodding beside me, his expression grim but satisfied. I closed my eyes, feeling something like relief wash through me. "That's right, Lena. I signed it the day I bought it, just like I always do, just like your mother taught me to do." The silence stretched again, and I could almost hear her thinking, recalculating. "Dad," she said finally, "we need to talk about this properly, face to face. Can you come over?" The invitation felt like a trap somehow, too sudden after being thrown out in the rain. "I don't think that's a good idea right now, Lena, not after last night." Her voice became pleading, a tone I recognized from her childhood. "Please, Dad, We can work this out. Family should stick together, especially now. I looked at Charlie, who was shaking his head emphatically. Lena, I said, I'll be in touch soon with a formal request for the return of my property. We can handle this through proper channels. The words felt strange in my mouth, too official for a conversation with my daughter, but somehow necessary. Dad, please don't make this complicated. We can... I hung up before she could finish, my finger jabbing the red button with more force than needed. Charlie patted my shoulder, his calloused hand heavy and reassuring. You did the right thing, Ed. Don't let them confuse you or make you feel guilty. That ticket is yours, legal and clear. He walked over to an old filing cabinet and pulled out a yellow legal pad. Now, let's write up that formal request. Nice and official, so there's no misunderstanding about what you want and when you want it. The letter took us 20 minutes to compose, Charlie's practical wisdom helping me find the right balance between firmness and civility. To Lena Morrison, it began. This letter serves as formal notice that I am requesting the immediate return of my personal property, specifically one lottery ticket legally signed by me, Edward Morrison, on the reverse side. The ticket is currently located at your residence, pinned to the refrigerator in the kitchen. I suggest we arrange a safe, neutral location for this handover to avoid any further misunderstandings. Please respond within 48 hours to confirm the return of this property. I signed it carefully, my name looking more substantial in ink than it had felt in days. Charlie made a photocopy on his ancient machine, the mechanical sounds somehow reassuring in their reliability. Keep this copy for your records, he said. And Ed, don't go to that house alone. If they want to meet, make it public. A parking lot, a restaurant, somewhere with witnesses. I sent the letter by certified mail from the post office, the clerk's stamp making it feel official and irreversible. The receipt went into my wallet next to my driver's license, proof that I'd followed proper procedures. That afternoon, my phone rang with Lena's number, but I let it go to voicemail. Her message was brief and evasive. Dad, we got your letter. This doesn't need to be so formal. Call me back so we can discuss this reasonably. But it was Colt who called that evening, his voice careful and measured. Ed, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't you give me your address? I'd like to come talk to you in person. Work this out, man to man. I'm staying with friends right now, I said. We can meet somewhere public if you want to talk. His pause was telling. I just want to make sure you're somewhere safe and comfortable. The lottery ticket was still sitting on that refrigerator, my signature on the back, making it legally mine. But physically it was in their house, under their control. I listened to the night sounds of the small town where I'd lived my entire life, and wondered exactly what lengths my daughter and son-in-law might go to in order to keep $10 million that didn't belong to them. Colt found me at Charlie's workshop the next morning, his pickup truck pulling into the gravel lot just as I was nursing my second cup of coffee from the thermos Charlie had lent me. Through the window, I watched him sit in his cab for a long moment, like he was gathering himself for a performance. When he finally stepped out, he moved with the deliberate confidence of a man who believed he held all the cards. He wore his best jeans and a button-down shirt I'd never seen before, the kind of outfit that said, "Respectable family man," without trying too hard. Charlie emerged from the back room, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes narrowing as he took in our unexpected visitor. "Morning, Colt," I said through the screen door, not moving to invite him inside. "Didn't expect to see you here." His smile was practiced, the kind salesmen use when they're about to make their pitch. "Ed, we need to talk. Really talk. Can we do this inside?" Charlie stepped up beside me, his presence solid and reassuring. "This is my shop," he said, his voice carrying the authority of ownership. "Ed's welcome here as long as he needs. You We'll see about. Colt's smile flickered, but held. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to work something out that benefits everyone. He held up a thick manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. I brought something I think you'll want to see, Ed. A solution that could make all this unpleasantness go away. The envelope looked heavy in his hands, stuffed full of papers that rustled when he shifted his grip. I stayed where I was, the screen door between us like a barrier that felt increasingly necessary. What kind of solution, Colt? The question came out more tired than curious, and I realized how exhausted I was from the constant tension of not knowing what came next. He gestured toward Charlie's workbench, where tools lay scattered around a half-assembled chainsaw. Can we sit down? This is important and I want to do it right. Charlie nodded toward 2 folding chairs, but positioned himself where he could see everything that happened. Colt opened the envelope with ceremony, pulling out a stack of papers and what looked like a bank envelope, the kind they use for large cash transactions. Ed, he said, settling the papers on the workbench. I know things got heated the other night. Lena feels terrible about how it all went down. We both do. His voice carried just the right note of regret, but his eyes remained calculating. The thing is, this lottery situation has gotten complicated. Legal implications, tax consequences, all sorts of red tape that could tie things up for months. He slid the bank envelope toward me, and I could see the thickness of whatever was inside. We want to make this simple. Clean. I looked at the envelope, but didn't touch it. What's in there, Colt? He leaned back in his chair, projecting the relaxed confidence of a man closing a deal. $50,000, cash, plus this agreement that settles everything between us. He tapped the papers with one finger. You sign this waiver, acknowledging that the ticket was purchased for the family's benefit, and you walk away with more money than most people see in 5 years. No lawyers, no complications, no hard feelings. The workshop felt smaller suddenly, like the walls had moved inward while he was talking. 50,000, I repeated, letting the number hang in the air. For a $10 million ticket. Colt's smile became more genuine, like I was finally understanding the game. For a $10 million ticket that's sitting in our house, Ed, possession being 9/10 of the law and all that. I don't sell my name, I said, the words coming out steady and final. Colt's expression shifted, confusion flickering across his features. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the binder Charlie had helped me organize that morning. Photocopies of every document I could think of, arranged in neat plastic sleeves like evidence in a court case. This is the receipt from when I bought the ticket, I said, opening to the first page. This is the photo I took in Lena's kitchen, showing the ticket under the magnet. This is the certified mail receipt from the letter I sent requesting its return. I turned each page deliberately, watching Colt's face as the documentation mounted. And this, I said, reaching the final page, is the phone number for the State Lottery Commission, where a very helpful young man named Jerry explained exactly what constitutes legal ownership of a winning ticket. Charlie was nodding beside me, his approval warming the cold space that had opened in my chest. Colt's confidence was evaporating like steam, his practiced composure cracking at the edges. Ed, be reasonable here. We're family. This doesn't need to get complicated with lawyers and government agencies. He gestured toward the cash envelope again, but his movements were less certain now. That's a fair offer for everyone involved. I closed the binder with a soft snap, the sound final in the quiet workshop. No, Colt, it's not. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number Charlie had looked up for me earlier. What are you doing? Colt asked, his voice sharper now, the salesman's smoothness wearing thin. Calling the non-emergency police line. I said, pressing the number before he could stop me. "I'd like to report a situation involving personal property that needs to be recovered." The dispatcher was professional and patient, asking questions I'd prepared answers for. "This involves a lottery ticket that belongs to me, signed in my name, currently being held at my daughter's residence. I've made a formal written request for its return, but they're refusing to comply. I'd like to request a civil standby while I reclaim my property." Colt was on his feet now, pacing the small space between workbench and door like a caged animal. "Ed, hang up the phone. We can work this out right now today. No need to involve the police." But I continued giving the dispatcher the address, Colt's increasingly desperate interruptions becoming background noise. When I hung up, the silence in the workshop felt heavy and charged. "They'll meet me at the house in an hour," I said. "With or without your cooperation, I'm getting my property back." Colt stared at me for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing words he couldn't spit out. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Blue, familiar, with the pickup truck magnet still attached. "You don't need the police," he said, his voice flat and defeated. "Here's your damn ticket." He set it on the workbench between us, the magnet clicking against the metal surface. "But Ed, you're making a mistake. Family sons should stick together, especially when money's involved. This is going to change things between us, and not for the better." I picked up the ticket, feeling the weight of it in my palm, seeing my own handwriting on the back for the first time in days. My signature was there, clear and legal, just as I'd remembered. "Some things are more important than money, Colt," I said, slipping the ticket into my shirt pocket. "Like knowing who you can trust." Charlie walked Colt to his truck, their conversation too quiet for me to hear, but tense enough that I could see it in their postures. When the pickup pulled out of the lot, spitting gravel, Charlie came back inside, shaking his head. "That boy's got problems, Ed. Big problems. A man who offers $50,000 for something worth $10 million, then just hands it over when you call his bluff? He's either stupid or desperate, and Colt Morrison ain't stupid." I nodded, fingering the ticket through my shirt fabric, feeling the paper's familiar texture. "What do you think he'll do now?" Charlie considered this, his weathered face serious. "Hard to say, but a man who's willing to steal $10 million might not stop just because you outmaneuvered him once. You need to be careful, Ed. Real careful." He gestured toward the phone on his desk. "You should call that lottery commission tomorrow. Start the claim process official-like. The sooner that money's in your name legally, the safer you'll be." That evening, sitting in Charlie's workshop with the lottery ticket secure in my wallet, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days' control. The ticket was mine again, legally and physically, and tomorrow I could begin the process of claiming what was rightfully mine. But Charlie's warning echoed in my mind, along with the look I'd seen in Colt's eyes when he'd finally handed over the ticket. It wasn't the look of a man who'd accepted defeat. It was the look of someone calculating his next move. I thought about Lena, about whether she knew what her husband had tried to do today, about what she would say when she found out the ticket was gone. Outside the workshop windows, darkness was falling over the small town where I'd lived my entire life, and somewhere in that darkness, my daughter and son-in-law were probably having a very difficult conversation about what to do next. The state lottery office sat in a nondescript building downtown, the kind of place you'd drive past 100 times without noticing. I parked Charlie's borrowed truck in the visitor lot, my hands steadier than they'd been in days as I pulled the lottery ticket from my wallet. The signature on the back looked exactly as I'd written it weeks ago, my name in blue ink that had become the most important words I'd ever put on paper. Charlie's presence in the passenger seat, a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. "You ready for this, Ed?" he asked, and I nodded, sliding the ticket carefully into the envelope I'd prepared. More ready than I've ever been for anything. The morning air felt crisp against my face as we walked toward the entrance, each step carrying me further from the man who'd been sleeping in his car and closer to someone I was still learning to become. The receptionist directed us to the claims department, where a middle-aged woman named Patricia sat behind a desk that looked like it had processed thousands of winning tickets before mine. She wore reading glasses on a chain and had the patient demeanor of someone who'd heard every possible lottery story. "Good morning," she said, looking up from her computer screen. "What can I help you with today?" I placed the envelope on her desk, my movements careful and deliberate. "I'd like to claim a winning ticket." She opened the envelope with practiced efficiency, examining the ticket under a magnifying lamp that made the numbers look larger and more official. "May I see your identification, please?" I handed over my driver's license, watching as she compared the signature on my ID to the one on the ticket's back. The scrutiny felt thorough and reassuring, proof that the system was designed to protect legitimate winners. "Mr. Morrison," she said after several minutes of verification, "congratulations. This appears to be authentic, and the signature matches your identification." She typed information into her computer, the clicking of keys filling the quiet office. "The prize amount is $10 million, payable as either annual installments over 30 years or a lump sum of approximately $6 million after taxes. Do you have a preference?" The numbers felt surreal even as she spoke them, more money than I'd ever imagined having at one time. "Lump sum," I said, the words coming out steady despite the magnitude of what they represented. Charlie squeezed my shoulder, his calloused hand heavy with approval. "Smart choice," Patricia said, printing forms that would need my signature. "We'll need to verify this with our security department, but assuming everything checks out, and I have no reason to believe it won't, you should receive your payment within 10 business days." She handed me a receipt that made everything official, my name printed alongside a prize amount that still didn't feel entirely real. That evening, back at Charlie's workshop, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a woman's voice introduced herself as Detective Sarah Martinez with the County Sheriff's Department. "Mr. Morrison, I understand you recently had some issues with a lottery ticket being held by family members?" The question sent ice through my veins, and I looked at Charlie, who was cleaning grease from his hands and listening intently. "That's been resolved," I said carefully. "I have the ticket back, and I've already filed my claim." She paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. "Mr. Morrison, we received a complaint alleging that you may have forged signatures on lottery documentation. The complainants are claiming you fraudulently added your name to a ticket that belonged to them." My legs felt weak, and I sank into Charlie's desk chair. "That's absolutely not true. The ticket was mine from the beginning. I can prove I bought it, and I signed it the day of purchase." "I'm sure we can sort this out," Detective Martinez said, her voice professional, but not unkind. "Would you be willing to come in tomorrow morning to provide a statement? Bring any documentation you have, receipts, photos, anything that supports your claim." After I hung up, Charlie was shaking his head with disgust. "That son of a bitch Colt. He couldn't steal the ticket, so now he's trying to paint you as the thief." The workshop felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. "Will they believe me?" I asked. Charlie walked over and put his hand on my shoulder. "Ed, you got more documentation than a tax audit. Receipt for the ticket, photo you took in Lena's kitchen, witnesses to your habits. Hell, I've seen you sign the back of tickets for 20 years. They got nothing but lies, and lies fall apart under scrutiny." But his confidence couldn't completely ease the knot that had formed in my stomach. After everything I'd been through, the possibility of losing it all to false accusations felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next morning at the sheriff's office, Detective Martinez turned out to be a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, who studied my documentation with the thoroughness of someone who'd seen every kind of fraud imaginable. "Tell me about your ticket-buying habits, Mr. Morrison," she said, spreading my photos across the interview room table. I explained about Sarah's advice, about signing every ticket immediately after purchase, about my routine of buying tickets at the same grocery store every week. "I have the receipt from the day I bought this particular ticket," I said, sliding it across the table. "Time-stamped, showing the transaction, and I've got my bank statement showing the debit card charge." She examined the receipt under a magnifying glass, then looked at the photo I'd taken in Lena's kitchen. "This photo shows the ticket pinned to the refrigerator. When did you take this?" I checked the timestamp on my phone. 3 days after I bought the ticket, right after the drawing was announced." She made notes, her pen moving quickly across a yellow pad. "Mr. Morrison," she said after an hour of questions, "I've seen enough fraud cases to know the difference between documentation and desperation. Your story is consistent, your evidence is contemporary, and frankly, the people making the complaint couldn't provide a single piece of proof that they purchased this ticket." She closed her folder and leaned back in her chair. "My recommendation to the district attorney will be that no charges are warranted. The complainants appear to be making false allegations in an attempt to claim money that doesn't belong to them." Relief flooded through me like warm water, and I felt my shoulders drop from where they'd been hunched near my ears. "What happens to them?" She shrugged. "That depends on whether they want to press this further. Making false reports to police is a crime, but if they back down now, we'll probably let it slide. Families' disputes get messy, and sometimes people do stupid things when money's involved." I left the sheriff's office feeling vindicated, but also deeply sad about what my own daughter had been willing to do. 2 weeks later, I stood in the office of Hartley Real Estate, looking at photographs of a small ranch house on Maple Street. The house had 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a kitchen window that faced east toward the morning light. "It's been well maintained," the agent said, flipping through inspection reports. "The previous owner was elderly, took good care of everything. New roof last year, updated electrical, solid foundation." I studied the photos, imagining morning coffee at that kitchen table, imagining a place that would be truly mine. "I'd like to make an offer," I said. "Full asking price, cash." The agent's eyebrows rose slightly, but she maintained her professional composure. That would be very attractive to the seller. When would you like to close?" I calculated the timeline in my head, thinking about bank transfers and paperwork. "As soon as possible. I've been without a permanent address for too long." She nodded, pulling out the necessary forms. "We can probably arrange closing within the week if you're serious about cash." The next months passed in a blur of purposeful activity. I established educational trusts for Emma and Jake, each funded with $200,000 that their mother couldn't touch. The bank trust officer, Margaret, assured me the funds would grow steadily until the children reached college age. "They'll never want for educational opportunities," she said, and I felt Sarah's approval in the certainty of that statement. Charlie received $25,000 for all his help, despite his protests that friends didn't owe each other anything. "This isn't debt," I told him. "It's gratitude." The vocational school received a $100,000 endowment for the Sarah Morrison Memorial Scholarship Fund, helping young people learn skilled trades. Each decision felt right, in a way that reminded me of the man I'd been before desperation had made me small and uncertain. 6 months after claiming my prize, I sat in my kitchen on Maple Street, morning light streaming through the window I'd chosen. My coffee was fresh, my newspaper was delivered each morning, and my bank statements showed a security I'd never imagined possible. The house felt like home, in every way Lena's place never had. Every choice mine, Every comfort earned rather than granted as charity. My phone buzzed with a text message, Lena's name appearing on the screen. "Dad, can we talk? I miss you. The kids ask about Grandpa all the time." I stared at the message for a long moment, remembering the sound of rain on the porch as my suitcase landed in the puddle, remembering the electronic lock clicking as the door closed behind me. The detective had said family disputes get messy when money's involved, and I wondered if my daughter understood yet how messy hers had gotten. Then I placed the phone face down on my kitchen table and poured another cup of tea. Some conversations could wait until I was ready to have them, and that day hadn't arrived yet. So what would you do in Ed's shoes? Forgive and forget, or let some wounds heal in their own time? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more stories about family, betrayal, and the price of standing up for what's yours.